When everyone around him was sleeping, he was standing under a broken streetlight with a book in his hand, a cheap notebook under his arm, and a dream so big that even the night seemed too small to hold it. People laughed at him. Neighbors shook their heads. Classmates mocked his torn shoes, his old shirt, and the way he bent over his books like the pages were his only treasure in the world. But none of them knew the fire burning quietly inside his chest, the kind of fire that does not shine loudly at first, the kind that grows in silence, through pain, through hunger, through rejection, through nights when there is no roof above your head except the sky and no teacher except your own will. He did not have a study table. He did not have a room of his own. He did not even have a proper lamp. What he had was a dream, and sometimes that is enough to begin a miracle. His name was Armin, and if you had seen him as a child, you would have thought the world had already decided his fate. He was born into a family that knew struggle better than comfort. His father was a daily wage laborer who came home with dusty hands and tired eyes. His mother worked from sunrise to midnight, stitching clothes for neighbors and washing utensils for a few extra coins. Their house was small, the walls were old, the roof leaked when it rained, and every month was a battle between rent, food, school fees, and survival. In that home, luxury was a word people used for other people. For Armin, luxury was a full meal. Luxury was a notebook with enough pages. Luxury was a pair of shoes without holes. Yet even as a little boy, Armin had a strange habit. While other children chased kites, played cricket in the streets, or watched television in neighbors' houses, he loved to sit near the window and trace the letters in his book with his fingers. He did not just read words, he felt them. He was fascinated by how a person could learn about the whole world from a few pages. He once asked his teacher, "Can books really change a life?" The teacher smiled and said, "Books can change a life, but only if the person reading them refuses to give up." Armin never forgot that sentence. It stayed in his mind like a spark waiting for dry wood. School was not easy for him. He often went hungry. Sometimes he skipped breakfast. Sometimes he went to school with only tea in his stomach and hope in his heart. He would sit in class, listening carefully, writing every word the teacher said, even when his pencil had become so short that it was hard to hold. When other boys brought money for snacks, Armin brought empty pockets and a quiet smile. When there were school projects, he worked harder than anyone else, not because he was the smartest, but because he feared being left behind by life itself. He knew education was the only bridge out of poverty, and he was determined to cross it, even if it meant crawling. But life does not test dreamers gently. One evening when Armin was in middle school, his father came home with bad news. The factory where he had been working had shut down. There would be no regular wages for some time. The house went silent. His mother looked at the floor. His father stared at the ceiling as if answers might be hidden there. Days turned into weeks, and the little money they had disappeared faster than water in summer heat. The electricity bill became overdue. Food grew scarce. Armin noticed his mother eating less so he could eat more. He noticed his father returning home more tired than ever, searching every street for work. And then, one day, Armin heard the words no child wants to hear. "Maybe you should leave school for now and help us." For a moment, the world stopped. He did not cry in front of them. He did not complain. He nodded because he loved his parents too much to burden them with his tears. But that night, after everyone slept, he took his books outside and sat beneath the streetlight at the corner of the lane. The bulb flickered weakly above him, buzzing like a tired insect, and the road was silent except for distant barking dogs and the occasional rattle of a motorcycle. Armin opened his notebook and began to study. That was the night his real journey began. The streetlight became his classroom, the pavement became his desk, and the darkness around him became the backdrop against which his determination began to shine. Night after night, he returned to that same spot. In winter, his fingers turned numb. In summer, sweat dripped onto his pages. In the rainy season, he covered his books with plastic sheets and kept reading. Some days the streetlight worked. Some days it failed. On those nights, Armin studied by the faint glow from nearby houses, by the reflection of moonlight on wet roads, by the courage in his own heart. His neighbors saw him and felt pity at first. Then they felt annoyance. Then laughter. "Look at him," some said. "He thinks studying under a streetlight will make him a success." Others said, "Dreams are fine, but poverty is bigger than dreams." Yet Armin never argued. He never wasted energy proving himself to people who had already decided he would fail. He saved every ounce of strength for the battle that mattered. And this is where his story becomes something you should not just hear but feel. Because maybe you are watching this right now carrying your own burden. Maybe you are tired. Maybe people around you do not understand your struggle. Maybe your dreams feel too far away, your path too hard, and your future too unclear. But Armin's story is proof that the place where you start does not define the place where you end. So stay with this story, because what happened next will make you believe again. Armin was not a genius in the beginning. He was not the top student in every subject. In fact, he failed a mathematics test in 9th grade and came home with a face full of shame. He expected anger. Instead, his mother gently placed her hand on his head and said, "Failure is not the end, Beta. Stopping is the end." Those words stayed with him. He went back to his books harder than before. He asked questions others were too shy to ask. He practiced equations until dawn. He rewrote answers until his fingers hurt. He treated every mistake like a teacher and every weakness like a challenge. Slowly, something changed. He started improving. His marks went up. Teachers began noticing him. Then came the first time he ranked among the top students in his class. It was a small victory to the world, but to Armin, it was the first crack of light in a very long tunnel. Still, his biggest challenge was not school. It was life after school. There was no guarantee of a future. There was no money for coaching, no laptop, no tutor, no private institute. His parents could not even afford the bus fare every day, so Armin often walked long distances to save money. He would wake up early, help his mother fetch water, assist his father in odd jobs when needed, attend school, and then spend his evenings studying under the streetlight. He learned how to manage time the hard way. He learned discipline not from motivational videos, but from necessity. He learned focus not in comfort, but in discomfort. And the amazing thing about hardship is this: if you survive it without losing your soul, it can turn you into something extraordinary. Years passed. Armin finished school with outstanding marks. People who had once laughed at him now whispered his name with surprise. Some were impressed, some jealous, and some pretended they had always believed in him. But Armin was not interested in applause. He was interested in progress. He wanted to study further. He wanted to become someone who could transform his family's life. He applied for scholarships, spent nights filling forms, waited anxiously for results, and prayed with the kind of hope only a struggling heart truly understands. When the scholarship letter finally arrived, his mother opened it with trembling hands. When she read the news, she sat down and cried. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time in years, she felt the future opening its door. Armin entered university with more dreams than money and more hunger than comfort. The city was bigger, faster, and far less forgiving than his neighborhood. At first, he felt invisible. Wealthy students drove in cars, wore branded clothes, and spoke with confidence built from privilege. Armin wore the same simple shirts he had worn in school. He carried used books. He ate the cheapest meals. Sometimes he skipped meals altogether. But he had something many of the richest students lacked: a reason. He was not there to impress anyone. He was there to build a life. And when a person studies with a purpose, every hour becomes valuable. University was not kind either. He faced subtle discrimination. Some classmates spoke down to him because of his background. Others acted as if poverty made him less intelligent. Professors sometimes underestimated him because he was quiet, reserved, and plainly dressed. But Armin had learned a powerful secret from the streetlight years. You do not have to shout to be strong. You do not have to be seen to be valuable. You do not have to be admired to be moving forward. So he kept his head down and worked. He read more than required. He stayed after lectures. He used the library like a second home. He took notes with almost obsessive care. He learned not just to memorize facts, but to understand systems, solve problems, and think creatively. He began to excel. Then came the turning point. One of his professors assigned a project that many students considered impossible. It required research, analysis, and a practical solution to a real-world problem. Armin saw it differently. He saw an opportunity. He spent weeks working on it, sometimes until 2 a.m., sometimes until dawn. He interviewed people, collected data, tested ideas, failed, adjusted, and tried again. When he presented his work, the room fell silent. His solution was not just good, it was brilliant. It was simple, practical, and deeply human. The professor stared at him in disbelief and asked, "Where did you learn to think like this?" Armin answered calmly, "Under a streetlight, sir." That sentence spread like fire. Soon his project was recognized beyond the university. A local competition brought it to the attention of professionals in the field. Then came an internship, then a job offer, then another. Armin did not rush. He chose carefully. He wanted a place where he could grow, learn, and create something meaningful. He entered the professional world with the same humility that had carried him through poverty, and that humility became one of his greatest strengths. He listened more than he spoke. He observed how successful people worked. He studied not only books but behavior, strategy, leadership, and communication. He learned how industries moved. He learned how markets changed. He learned how to build value. And because he had spent years solving problems with almost nothing, he became astonishingly good at solving problems with a lot. At work, people began to notice. Armin could take a complicated task and simplify it. He could turn chaos into structure. He could find opportunities where others saw only obstacles. When deadlines were tight, he stayed calm. When others panicked, he planned. When a project was failing, he stayed behind to fix it. His managers appreciated his discipline. His colleagues admired his consistency. Within a few years, he was promoted again and again. He led teams. He trained others. He developed systems that saved time and money. He proposed ideas that opened new markets. One of his initiatives became so successful that the company expanded internationally. Armin's name started appearing in meetings, reports, conferences, and award ceremonies. And yet, the boy who studied under the streetlight never disappeared. Even after success, Armin still remembered the nights of cold pavement and flickering light. He remembered his mother's tired hands, his father's cracked shoes, the empty lunchbox, the borrowed textbooks, the humiliation, the doubts, the hunger. He remembered the lonely road where he had made a promise to himself. One day, I will not let this struggle be wasted. He kept that promise, but he did more than that. He transformed his pain into purpose. Because now Armin had money, and money alone was not enough to satisfy him. He wanted impact. He wanted to build something that would change other lives like his. So he started a foundation for poor students. He funded scholarships for children who had talent but no resources. He opened evening learning centers in underprivileged neighborhoods. He donated books, laptops, uniforms, and study materials. He personally visited schools in slum areas, spoke to children, and told them, "Do not be ashamed of where you study. Be ashamed only if you stop believing in yourself." Kids who had never imagined a future suddenly began imagining one. Parents who had given up hope started smiling again. Teachers said Armin's visits changed lives, but Armin always said the same thing: "I am only returning what life once borrowed from me." The media discovered his story. Newspapers wrote headlines about the poor boy who became a world-class success. Interviews followed. Cameras followed. People wanted to know his secret. They asked, "How did you do it?" Armin would smile and answer, "I worked when others slept. I studied when others laughed. I kept going when the world told me to stop." Success is not magic. It is consistency, sacrifice, patience, and belief. He became an inspiration across countries. Students, dreamers, and young professionals saw themselves in his journey. His story spread because it was not built on luck alone. It was built on character. And character, when tested by fire, becomes unforgettable. But fame did not erase his past. One evening, many years after his success, Armin returned to the street where he had once studied. The old streetlight was still there, though older, dimmer, and surrounded by new buildings. He stood beneath it quietly. The same road, the same silence, the same memory. He smiled as he remembered the boy he used to be. That boy had no money, no status, no connections, and no guarantee of tomorrow, but he had the courage to continue. Armin touched the metal pole lightly and whispered, "You saw everything." He did not mean the light, he meant the journey. The pain, the tears, the hope, the sleepless nights, the promises made in darkness, the small victories, the invisible battles, the entire rise from nothing to something. And that is the beautiful truth about life. Some of the brightest futures are built in the darkest places. So when you see someone struggling, do not laugh too quickly. When you see a person studying late at night, do not assume they are wasting time. When you see someone with torn shoes, an old bag, or a weak beginning, do not mistake their current situation for their final destination. The world is full of people who were once ignored and later became impossible to ignore. The world is full of stories that began with pain and ended in power. Armin's life is one of them. And maybe that is why this story matters so much, because it reminds us that success is not reserved for the privileged alone. It is not owned by the rich alone. It is not written only for the lucky. Success belongs to those who keep walking when the road is rough. Success belongs to those who study under streetlights and still believe in sunrise. Success belongs to those who are willing to suffer today for a better tomorrow. Success belongs to those who fall and rise, break and heal, fail and try again. So let this story sit in your heart for a moment. Let it push you. Let it wake you up. Let it remind you that no matter how poor your beginning is, your ending is not fixed. No matter how many people doubt you, you can still become the proof they needed. No matter how dark the night feels, you can still build a future that shines. Keep going, keep learning, keep improving, keep believing. And when people ask how you made it, you will be able to smile and say, "I did not give up when life was hard." If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope, and keep this message close to your heart. Because one day your struggle may become your strength, your pain may become your power, and your smallest beginning may lead to your greatest success. The moral of the story is simple. Never judge your future by your present circumstances. Hard work done in silence, with patience and faith, can turn even the poorest beginning into a world-class success.